Now let's talk about databases. At the moment, or up until this point in this course, we always used SQLite, which, as mentioned before, basically means that we have one file sitting in our project folder, which is holding all our data. And then the SQLite engine, if you want to call it like this, is basically already built into Python. That's why we didn't need to install any extra software for this. This is great for development because we don't need to install anything to get started. And that's amazing, of course. The downside with SQLite, however, is that it can be slow. So for very large applications with a lot of incoming requests, that might be a problem. Though I will also say that for many websites, you simply don't have the traffic where this would be a problem. So that might not be the biggest issue. But in addition, if you ever erase that file and you don't have an ongoing backup, then the data is lost. Your database data is lost because it's just this file. Whereas, of course, if you have a database server, maybe a managed server by some database provider, you automatically have backups and it's not that easy to accidentally delete the data. So that might be another aspect you should be aware of. Therefore, you should definitely think about the database and which database you want to use. And it doesn't even start with SQLite or not SQLite. We can start at a higher level instead. And we can ask ourselves if we want to stick to SQL or if NoSQL might be a better option for us. Now, that's not something I want to discuss in depth here. I have a dedicated article and video on that, which you'll find attached, where I dive into SQL and NoSQL and what the differences are. When building a website with Django, there are reasons to prefer SQL though, because Django's model system, so using these Django models and using them to store data and so on, as we saw it in this course, that all is built on SQL. So with NoSQL databases, it doesn't work. You can use NoSQL with Django, but you then can't use those Django models, at least not like that. So therefore, there is a reason to prefer SQL when working with Django, and hence I will also stick to SQL here in this module. But then, once we made this decision, the question is whether we want to use SQLite or maybe an alternative, a bigger database solution like MySQL or PostgreSQL. These are options, and the main difference is that SQLite is this file-based database, whereas with MySQL and Postgres, and of course other SQL options as well, you have a real database server which manages data storage. And that leads to better performance and also better data security, where it's not as easy to accidentally get rid of your data. In this course section, I'll show you both. We're going to start with SQLite and we're going to deploy SQLite, but we're also thereafter going to have a look at working with PostgreSQL as an alternative and setting up such a database. Because in general, there are reasons, which I outlined, why you might want to go for such a database solution instead of SQLite.